Hey everybody, it is Friday, February 24th. You're listening to the Mo News podcast on this last day of February. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. The poor folks who, those rare folks born on February 29th, they don't get to celebrate their birthday like they did last year. I mean, they can celebrate their birthday, but just not on the day.
But they have a fun fact and get to tell everyone they meet that they're leap year babies. They have a cool little tidbit immediately going into any, work event where you have to give 3 things about yourself when you're introducing yourself.
True.
So they've got that.
They do got that. We should note Oscars weekend this Sunday night. We'll get into that in the podcast. Though it doesn't feel like it has the oomph it used to have, Jill, because nobody knows the movies anymore, unless you're a real film buff.
I think between social media and streaming, this sort of star power of the Academy Awards isn't what it used to be.
Right. The red carpet isn't what it used to be because now you see celebs all the time, right, on their social media, and there's all these various events. And then with streaming and just, for a while there over the last decade, TV became bigger than the movies. A lot of those, actors who made their names on film, went to television. And so it just, feels like a bygone era, but we'll still tune in for the 5-hour presentation on Sunday.
That said, it's what I'm watching this weekend.
Right.
So who are we?
Here's your preview at the end of the podcast. We're both going to be watching the Oscars on Sunday. The few, the proud.
Okay, let's get to the headlines. President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will meet in Washington, D.C. today. What Trump is saying about the meeting. Meanwhile, Britain commits to putting boots on the ground and planes in the air in Ukraine.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about the big meeting that Trump and the British Prime Minister had and the surprise invite for Trump that was revealed during their one-on-one.
Plus, those tariffs on Canada and Mexico set to take effect within days. Attorney General Pam Bondi releases the Epstein files. What's in them? And are they as juicy as expected?
Not worth the squeeze, Jill. Wah, wah, wah.
In health news, a mystery disease linked to bats kills dozens in Congo.
As if 2025 didn't have enough surprises for us.
What we know about the death of Oscar winner Gene Hackman and his wife and their dog. Again, it is Oscar weekend, where to watch and what to expect. Plus, who is on Blue Origin's all-female spaceflight? Moshe, you can give who you think is the biggest name. And it will say a lot about how you value star power.
Your clue for this flight that's going into space, baby, you're a firework.
Well, we certainly know what music they'll be playing as they're blasting off.
They can, and it's a short mission, but they will technically go into space. We'll tell you about some of the celebs.
Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating. Speaking of what we're watching, all eyes will be on a high-stakes summit in Washington, D.C. today. President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will meet at the White House. Trump said on Thursday he thinks it will be a good meeting and praised the Ukrainian soldiers for fighting bravely. It came as Trump hosted the British Prime Minister at the White House. UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that Britain is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air for a Ukraine peace deal. He said he's going to be hosting 18 countries on Sunday to talk more about a peace plan. Trump has already said the U.S. will not be putting boots on the ground to keep peace there. Both Zelensky and Trump are coming into today's meeting with different goals and expectations. Ukraine wants some assurances that America is still behind them in their war against Russia. President Trump, meanwhile, looking to secure a deal to tap into Ukraine's vast mineral wealth. It's something the Trump administration has recently pushed on Kyiv. Trump's also looking to help negotiate an end to the war. Trump is also looking to help negotiate an end to the war, now 3 years after Russian President Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So Trump told reporters of his goals. He says, quote, "My number one thing is to get that stopped," meaning the war and the fighting. "My number two thing is I don't want to have to pay any more money." And he said, now we're going to be getting all of that money back, plus a lot more. Moshe, Zelensky had been pushing for this meeting after Trump's team met with Russian officials to talk about the end of the war without Ukrainian officials there. So what are you specifically watching as these two leaders meet later today?
Yeah, so 11 a.m. Eastern time, these two get together after what has been a very contentious few weeks between the two. Trump actually singing a very different tune, as you mentioned, praising the bravery of Ukrainians yesterday. Also, embracing aspects of Putin's arguments about the war recently. The U.S. pushed a resolution and voted with Russia at the UN that didn't call Russia the aggressor. He, of course, recently called Zelensky a dictator several times. And Trump has been pushing here, saying, Ukraine, you get nothing more from us unless you hand over hundreds of billions of dollars in mineral deposits in your country in return for the $180 billion in aid that the U.S. has given you over the course of the past few years. Now, a reporter asked Thursday, and I love the British reporters because they do not care. They will ask the most aggressive questions. And so a British reporter yesterday, while the UK prime minister was there, asked Trump if he's going to apologize to Zelensky tomorrow for calling him a dictator. Provocative question, could have gotten a lot of answers. Trump decided not really to push back hard, taking a new tone, and this might be partially because there's been this big push from European leaders. You had Macron in earlier in the week from France. He called him Chez Donald. You had the UK Prime Minister yesterday showed up with an envelope from King Charles inviting Trump for a second state visit. No other president in United States history has gotten two state visits to the UK, and Trump is very into the royal family, so he very much enjoyed that. In fact, the UK Prime Minister yesterday made Trump read the letter while the cameras were there. And so you did see the softer language from Trump on Ukraine, contrast from what we heard last week. Take a listen to Trump yesterday.
And I think we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to get along really well. Okay? We have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for him. We've given him a lot of equipment and a lot of money, but they have fought very bravely, no matter how you figure it. They have really fought. Somebody has to use that equipment, and they have been very brave in that sense.
So he's talking there about, how he's going to have this great meeting with Zelensky. They're going to get along. The Ukrainians are very brave. Now, this is not uncommon language for a lot of politicians, including the former President Biden and others describing Ukraine. But for Trump, who's been taking a very neutral stance here and at times praising Putin more than he praises Ukraine, it is notable going into today. So I think it's going to be a good meeting. I'd be shocked. Zelensky needs this to be a good meeting. Zelensky is looking for security guarantees. He knows that part of the way that you get a good relationship with Donald Trump is through praising Donald Trump and giving in when you can in negotiations. You saw it from Starmer. You saw it from Macron. You'll see it from Zelensky today. They're set to sign a major deal that'll give the U.S. access to hundreds of billions of dollars in mineral deposits. They're going to set up a fund here that Ukraine and the U.S. will manage. The Ukrainians don't like to call it paying the U.S. back, but they see this as economic development. Now, one other thing that was notable yesterday is that Trump was asked whether he could trust Vladimir Putin, given that he's invaded Ukraine twice in the past decade. And he's like, yeah, I think he will keep his word. And I think that the fact that Americans will be involved in this mineral project inside Ukraine will be a deterrent. Now, Ukraine is looking for more. They're looking for U.S. soldiers. They're looking for NATO membership. Of course, the Europeans here making their own promises. In fact, there was a moment yesterday where Trump asked Starmer, hey, you could win in a war against Russia, right? I'm not getting involved in that. And so that is the worry for the Europeans. They're not used to not being a part of NATO, not having U.S. back up, the most powerful military force in modern history. But Trump isn't willing to budge there. And so we'll see what comes of this. That's something that Zelensky's hoping for. And so we'll have to watch their language today on that.
All right, so we'll be watching that. And let's talk tariffs, what President Trump has called the most beautiful word in the English language. Although on Thursday, he did walk that back a little bit in his press conference with the British Prime Minister. He's like, maybe I should have said, wife or children were my favorite words.
Well, what's funny is I remember on the campaign trail when he rolled that out, he actually at a campaign rally was like, some people say love is the most beautiful word. I think the most beautiful word is tariffs. So it is interesting in retrospect here that he's correcting himself.
Regardless, the president said Thursday that the 25% tariffs that he has threatened to enact on Canada and Mexico will actually go into effect on Tuesday, along with an additional 10% tax on Chinese imports. This is beyond the 10% that the U.S. enacted in the last few weeks. All of this escalating tensions with three of America's biggest trading partners. Earlier this month, the president had paused the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a month after both countries announced new border security measures. The Canada-Mexico tariffs apply to all imports except Canadian energy products, which will be taxed at 10%. The new China tariffs follow a 10% duty that was imposed earlier this month.
They continue to go up. The Chinese tariffs are already in effect here. The Canada-Mexico ones, well, we're going to watch that over the coming 4 days here, sort of like we did in early February, where it came down to the wire, and then there were calls with Trudeau, and then a call with the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, and then they were delayed for a month. And in fact, Trump indicated earlier this week that he was going to wait until April, delay them again. Now it appears, based on this True Social post over the last 24 hours, he says drugs are still pouring into the country, fentanyl made and supplied by China coming through. The only way to stop this is to challenge Mexico and Canada. You do see large seizures, but ultimately he wants to see more. And so we know that Trump uses tariffs as a negotiation tactic. Last time, they were able to get a postponement when Canada and Mexico both promised more border security, promised, I think, in Canada. Trudeau promised a fentanyl czar. So it looks like he's trying to extract more concessions here. And you do see Republicans on Capitol Hill, including Ted Cruz and others, allies of Trump, who say, they hope that Canada and Mexico are able to do more here to prevent these tariffs from taking effect. So it's interesting here. He keeps mentioning drugs. Not much fentanyl comes from Canada based on the seizure numbers, like very minimal. Like the amount of fentanyl in a year from Canada is what comes in a day from Mexico. So what Trudeau can promise is unclear, because he's also going to be out of office in the next week or two. And so we'll watch this closely over the next 4 days. We've learned his announcement then leads to last-second negotiations and potential postponement here. But nonetheless, if they somehow go into effect, major economic consequences, more for Canada and Mexico than for us in the U.S. But 30-something states here, the biggest trading partner for them, Canada and Mexico. And so this could have a huge impact, especially since Canada and Mexico are going to announce counter tariffs on U.S. goods. So something we're going to watch very closely, given how close all three countries are. Several $1 trillion in trade happens every year. And so impact will happen across both borders if they actually go into effect. But we'll be telling you about this again on Monday and again on Tuesday, and then likely a postponement on Wednesday. That's my prediction for next week, Jill.
So you're calling the president's bluff. Is that how I'm reading this?
I'm not calling a bluff. I'm calling a negotiation tactic, and I'm calling that Canada and Mexico will call up and say, how about if we do X, Y, and Z? We're going to add 10,000 more border security, or we're going to spend this many more $1 billion on whatever, Donald. What do you think? It's like, all right, I'll push it back again.
The tariffs will take effect in April, and then we'll do this song and dance again.
I think at some point they're gonna be like, listen, like can we end this monthly threat? Like, what do I have to do?
Okay, time for the speed read from News Nation. The Department of Justice released files regarding Jeffrey Epstein to a small group of conservative influencers yesterday. The group of influencers, including the people who oversee the X and Instagram handles for libs of TikTok, DC Drano, and House and Habit, was seen leaving the White House with binders labeled The Epstein Files Phase 1. It does not appear that there is any new information in the documents that came out, but the Trump administration has been talking about revealing more details for a while, including when he was on the campaign trail.
Yeah, this has been a huge cause, especially a number of folks on the right, though they have been getting pressure from both sides to release the files here. There was this like celebratory photo, Jill, of these conservatives, pro-Trump influencers who happened to be at the White House, just over a dozen of them. They got these binders. They took these photos smiling, holding up the binders. And, you know, there are some families of the victims here who took offense at that, being like, this is not celebratory, the abuse of a minor here, but it's celebratory for them because they feel like they accomplished something. But then when you actually opened up those binders, what did you get? Epstein's contact list, like literally people who were in his phone. some of whom he never called, but he had their numbers. And so a lot of them repeats from lists that we've seen before. And there's frustration among some Republicans that this is the way they roll things out over at the White House with this group of influencers, as opposed to Republican members of Congress who were asking for this information as well.
Attorney General Pam Bondi had teased the release of the files yesterday and happened to be in the White House while the influencers were visiting. Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, who is heading a task force on government transparency, said her group was not given the documents, and she criticized the administration for the limited release. She wrote on X, quote, "A New York Post story just revealed that the documents will simply be Epstein's phone book." And then in all caps, "This is not what we or the American people asked for. Get us the information we asked for," instead of leaking old info to the press.
Yeah, so interesting here, even among Trump allies, that they were upset about all of this. A reminder: Jeffrey Epstein, he was charged with sex trafficking, died in jail back in 2019 during the last Trump administration. His girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for helping Epstein traffic minors. And this has been the subject of a lot of discussions, documentaries, online chatter for a number of years here, civil trials going back to when Epstein was first arrested 20 plus years ago. And the Justice Department has been facing pressure from both parties to release files. Democrats want them to release files because who was on Epstein's plane a few times? Donald Trump. And as far as Republicans, they want the information out there, and they want to show all the various liberals and Democrats who were on Epstein's plane or potentially in his phone book and eventually spent time with him as well. There appears to be a secondary fight here, Jill, when it comes to actual information that has not become public yet between the Justice Department and the FBI. The Attorney General Pam Bondi yesterday sending a fiery letter to the FBI Director Kash Patel, so an internal fight there in the Trump administration, accusing the FBI of withholding documents. She's demanding that they make everything available to her today. So there's some back and forth here among those who've been following this case very closely. They say that there's some video that hasn't been released yet of various FBI searches, but for the most part, a lot of this information, that people talk about, they're out there. We've known for a while the names in the little black book, so-called little black book of Jeffrey Epstein. The flight logs of the jets have been out there for so long. There's actually been websites created that document every single flight that he's ever taken and who was on each flight, and they're searchable. Business Insider is among the websites that has done that. Now, a federal court last year unsealed a whole bunch of records. We talked about that on this podcast. It revealed who else? Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, among others that had traveled with Epstein, but they're not accused of anything. They just traveled with him. He was a billionaire and he had a lot of rich friends and notable friends, and that was one of his goals. There is a lot of misinformation about a client list of Epstein. You hear that term thrown a lot online. The FBI and people who've been covering this case for the FBI for decades say there is no evidence that he kept a ledger or a list of clients who were involved in a sex trafficking operation, that ultimately he had a contact list in his phone, and that was it. No client list, so to speak. So if one of you has a friend out there who likes to talk about the Epstein case a lot, tell them to take a deep breath. Prepare to be disappointed with the revelations that are out there so far.
Okay, now to a very different type of story in health news from The Guardian. A mystery illness in the Democratic Republic of Congo has infected at least 1,096 people and killed 60. Nearly half died within 48 hours of symptoms appearing. This is according to the World Health Organization. The disease causes uncontrolled bleeding, vomiting, and diarrhea. The outbreak has impacted 2 remote villages. It was identified last month after 3 children under the age of 5 ate a bat and died within 48 hours. Tests ruled out Ebola and Marburg, which are 2 other diseases that cause deadly bleeding and have spread throughout the country. Congo is battling multiple health crises, including Mpox, which has killed 1,200 people since early 2024, and a recent flu-like illness linked to malaria that's killed 31 people. The country experienced the world's second deadliest Ebola outbreak, killing nearly 2,300 people between 2018 and 2020.
Yeah, sadly, Congo is the epicenter for a lot of these diseases. So this one is a mystery illness as of right now. There were those 3 children in the village of Boloko. It's a remote province. The children died, as you said, within 2 days. And then a few weeks later, so there was that case. And then a few weeks later, a second second and larger outbreak was recorded about 100 miles away in a different village where hundreds of people were ill. 141 fell sick within a single week, according to the World Health Organization. And so they're trying to identify this illness. Now, the fact that those first 3 kids ate bat, that's concerning. Bats are known to transmit diseases to humans, and recent studies have identified coronaviruses closely related to COVID-19 that bats carry. We've told you about bats for a while. This does not appear to be one of them. Some studies have turned up positive for measles, but this doesn't appear to be measles either. One concerning thing is the fact that the U.S. has announced it's leaving the World Health Organization, and the U.S. funds a lot of the work the World Health Organization does, and there is that foreign aid freeze that Trump has announced, that DOGE has enacted here, that could lead to worsening conditions globally, including in these areas of Africa, which again depend on a lot of aid from the U.S. and others. So right now, nothing to be concerned of here in the U.S., but they are trying to identify exactly what is this disease in the Congo.
From NBC News, legendary actor Gene Hackman, his wife, Betsy Arakawa, and their dog have been found dead at their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hackman was 95 years old. Arakawa was 64 years old. Officials say they had been dead for quite a while before their bodies were found in separate rooms of their home. Authorities say there is an ongoing investigation into the circumstances surrounding their deaths. A search warrant says the deaths are, quote, suspicious enough in nature to require a thorough search and investigation. Hackman's family released a brief statement Thursday saying that he was loved and admired by millions around the world for his brilliant acting career. But to us, he was always just dad and grandpa. According to the search warrant, 2 maintenance workers said that they found the front door of the home ajar and the couple dead inside. It says the deputies did not observe any signs of forced entry into the house. Arakawa's body was found on the floor of a bathroom. There was a space heater near her head and a bottle of prescription pills located on the counter. The responding deputy believes that the heater, quote, could have fallen in the event that the female abruptly fell to the ground. The pills from the bottle were scattered on the countertop. Again, this is all according to the warrant. And a German Shepherd was found dead about 10 feet from her in a closet in the bathroom.
And then in a separate part of the house, Hackman was found dead in a mud room near the kitchen. It states that they believe he may have fallen suddenly. They are still putting the bodies here through testing, medical testing, to try to get a sense of what exactly happened here. Family members had initially suspected it might be a carbon monoxide leak that killed everyone, but the fire department responding to the home, the gas company, they've all tested for that, and they haven't found any issues related to that. Now, of course, they got to test the bodies further in the autopsy to see if there was potential linkage there. Notably, 2 other dogs on the property were found alive as well. Again, no signs of foul play here, but still suspicious, and just a tragic way for Gene Hackman, a legendary actor, to go out here, as well as his wife, who was an accomplished pianist. As for Gene Hackman, again, 95 years old, he had an incredible career over nearly 50 years of acting. He grew up in Danville, Illinois. A sad start for him that he says actually inspired his acting career. He's 13 years old, and he's told the story. He told the story a lot. His father abandoned the family, literally driving away while his son was playing in the street. So young Gene is playing in the street. His father waves at him, drives away. He didn't realize that was his father leaving for good, and said later, maybe that's why I became an actor, trying to figure out processing my emotions and processing how someone could have been inspired to do that. Nonetheless, he goes on to become a 2-time Oscar winner, star of many, many films. A number of you probably have seen Bonnie and Clyde, The French Connection, Jill. I loved him in Hoosiers, in Crimson Tide, Royal Tenenbaums, where he could also do comedy. Young Frankenstein, that was Gene Hackman. Birdcage, he was in. He was also Lex Luthor in Superman. So just an incredible career, an actor with incredible range. And that was the thing. In his films, he was a submarine commander, a widower, a war hero, a steel worker, a sheriff, a spy, a basketball coach. He played the president. And so there was no pigeonholing Gene Hackman. He did leave acting about 20 years ago and then went into retirement, wrote some books. And so we'll look out for more details on exactly what may have taken place here.
From ABC News, it's been an interesting awards season, to say the least, but now it is finally time for the main event. The 2025 Oscars. This Sunday, stars from some of the biggest movies of the year will gather at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, California, for the 97th Academy Awards. The show starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC, but you can also stream it on regular Hulu, not just Hulu Live. This year's award show will be hosted by Conan O'Brien. There will be performances from Wicked co-stars and nominees Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, among others. As far as the nominations go, Emilia Perez leads the pack with the most nominations at 13, but the film's award season campaign has been shrouded in drama surrounding the lead actress, Carla Sofia Gascon, all thanks to some controversial posts that she made on her social media accounts. It is unclear whether she will walk the red carpet or give interviews, but she will reportedly be there.
Among the controversies, Jill, related to Gascon, is a bunch of social media posts that she made on X in which she expressed controversial views about Muslims, about George Floyd, and about diversity at the Oscars.
So she herself is a trans woman. She came out as a trans woman in 2016, and there were expectations that she was going to be a shoo-in for this award. But then, of course, some of those controversial social media posts came to light, which has made this a bit more complicated.
As for the best film, Wicked and The Brutalist are tied for second place with 10 different nominations in various categories. As for the best picture, right now, Anora appears to be the predicted favorite. Jill, admittedly, I have only seen Wicked in this group. I see A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance. Have you done better than me?
No, actually, I have not. I've just seen Wicked.
Sorry, dear listener. We typically, try to read.
We try.
Well, we do read all the news so you don't have to, but we do not watch all the Oscar-nominated films so you don't have to. That is a job you still have.
Well, we've got about 48 hours if you want to try to make up for some
binge
lost
them
time.
with our children.
Yes.
Yeah, we could try.
And finally, from CNBC, singer Katy Perry and CBS's Gayle King will be joining Jeff Bezos' fiance, Lauren Sanchez, on his rocket company Blue Origin's next crewed mission. It is an all-female crew. The company on Thursday announced the next 6-person crew of its new Shepard rocket. It also includes an aerospace engineer, a film producer, and a bioastronautics research scientist and civil rights activist. Again, all female. The launch is planned for this spring. So
the way the Blue Origin flight works, and this is their new Shepard rocket, this will be their 11th flight, and the trip literally takes 10 minutes into space. They pass an altitude of about 62 miles or 100 kilometers. That's the threshold. That's the boundary between Earth and the atmosphere and space. And so you basically pass 62 miles. You're technically in space. You're there for a few moments, and then you start coming back down. There have been a number of other notable folks who've taken this ride. William Shatner from Star Trek. Bezos himself did it. Michael Strahan, who's on ABC, is a football commentator and also former football player. Among those who've taken this ride before, I watched Gayle talk about this on the CBS morning show yesterday. She says she's very nervous, but she wants to do it. So kudos to Gayle for taking this leap. There's no date set for this yet, but it is set for sometime this spring.
Yes, Gayle said she consulted with Oprah. And
of course,
Oprah helped her make
did.
the decision. That's who I'd listen to. Like, if I had Oprah as a best friend, that's who I'd go to.
If
for
Oprah's
advice.
your best friend, you're like, listen, Oprah, at this point in my life, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. Should I do this? And, you follow Oprah's advice. And that's what Gayle's doing here. Interesting choice on Katy Perry, though. I wouldn't have suspected Katy Perry to space, but there you have it.
It's a weird one, right? I don't really get it. I would have soon. I wonder if they asked Beyonce or somebody else.
Well, that's the question, right? Did they ask Taylor? Did they ask Beyonce? How does this process work for like the celeb selections to Blue Origin? That's a question for Bezos in the future.
Okay, Moshe, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, what are you watching?
The aforementioned Oscars, of course. Conan O'Brien should be fun. You know, he likes to poke at the celeb, so I'll at least be watching the beginning there. Jill, I've gotten into Zero Day. Alex and I are watching that on Netflix. That's that De Niro series with the cyber attack. So I'm a few episodes in there. Also, if you're looking for something new, Paramount Plus has a docudrama called September 5th. It's about the 1972 Munich Olympics and massacre there. That's where the 11 Israeli athletes were taken hostage and later murdered by Palestinian terrorists. And this docudrama comes from the perspective of the ABC Sports broadcasting team, which notably covered the situation in real time. So that's September 5th over on Paramount Plus. Yourself?
Okay, so I hope to watch the Oscars. And I just watched on one of my flights on the plane heading home from Florida, Fly Me to the Moon. It came out last year. It's an American historical romantic comedy drama starring Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum. Moshe, have you seen it?
I have not, but I'm into space stuff. Was it good?
Yeah, it's an interesting premise. Scarlett Johansson's character is this huge ad exec, and she has to basically create a false moon landing in case the actual moon landing fails. And it's pretty interesting. It's on Apple Plus, but it's on Apple TV, by the way, if you want to watch it.
We have a few of those followers on Instagram, by the way, who insist that I need to give a fair shake to the people who think the moon landing was faked.
Okay, well, they would love this movie then.
This is going to be evidence for them, yes. Jill, what are you reading this weekend?
Moshe, I'm going to get Ben Sheehan's book, What Does the Constitution Say? A Kid's Guide to How Our Democracy Works. He also wrote a version for adults. And as we've talked about, I just interviewed him all about the Constitution, kind of like a refresher, everything you may have forgotten from social studies class back in high school. And it piqued my curiosity. I realized how much I don't know. So that's what I'm going to be working on. What about you?
Yes, definitely. If you haven't heard Jill's interview with Ben, that's over on the Mo News Interview podcast. I'm sure all of you by now are subscribed to our interview podcast, so you can check out that new episode. I am getting started on an article in the Atlantic magazine. It's a deep dive into the Murdochs with James Murdoch, one of the sons. So if you were into Succession, and which is loosely based on the Murdoch family, he is talking about growing up Murdoch, mind games, sibling rivalries, and the war for the family media empire. It's a long read, so saving it for the weekend.
And our favorite topic, Moshe, what are you eating?
Sort of eating. Would you consider mince eating? I've Risewell mince. Alex got them for me recently. They're mince, like for your breath, but they also fight cavities and clean your teeth. So this whole brand Risewell, we use their toothpaste, we use their toothpaste, we use their floss, and it is saving the people around you from your breath, and also fighting cavities at the same time. So I'm into those. Jill, your eating, it sounds much more exciting than my mince.
Well, after what I'm eating, I could use your mince, I think. So it's my mom's 75th birthday, as I mentioned a couple of days ago, and we are celebrating family-style Italian at Matteo's. So roll me home, Moshe.
Matteo's, a
Long Island staple.
A famous Long Island staple that also has a Boca branch that you need to head to next time you go to Florida.
All right, everyone. That does it for the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.